Somebody who's barely graduating from a college will show 3 jobs on LinkedIn. I did internship here, I wrote a paper there, and I worked somewhere there. And somebody who's got 2 years of experience will show 4 jobs in 2 years, and somebody who's got 6 years of experience will show 8 jobs in 6 years, right? And it's okay compared to we had this entire thing that at least 5 years of and sorry, kind of derails my train of thought. Yeah, coming back to the thought that something has changed out there. I have run a few of these organizations. So when I tell tales about how I've tried to manage people, you talked about Channel V. I remember once that we had a client meeting at 10 in the morning, this big advertiser, he had come to the office and thankfully he was behind me. I went to the office and took him to the conference room, opened the door and quickly shut it because there was a couple lying asleep on the door, on the conference table, right? So I had to take him back to my room, go back, tell them to wake up, put on their clothes and, go home or something, right? And then I had to actually put up a sign in the employee section saying, no smoking at all times, no alcohol before 5 p.m. and please no sex before 9 p.m., right? We had to actually put that in the office. And so in some ways that's probably, and that was actually 15, 16 years ago. So I can only imagine that if that was the harbinger of the thin edge of the wedge, much of the change has actually come into larger and regular companies today. So given all of this, what happens in terms of HR? Increasingly, I'm actually challenged by the founders I fund, saying, Mahesh, why do I need HR? And that's really a pretty heretical thought. And often I have to think back and say, what role did HR play in this world that we grew up in? And what role is HR playing in this world today? There's one thing I absolutely agree on, that the true HR head of a company is the CEO, especially of a startup. And the number one thing I tell people is that people I fund or the people I work with is you're only as good as the people you grow and build around you. Again, unlike many people who say, no, a team starts a company, actually most successful Indian startups are founded by 1 or 2 people, maybe 1 person. So it's the team that you're able to get around you later. And that basically means they're not your equal partners, but you are actually chief people officer, chief HR officer, in addition to this minor title of being chief executive officer of the company. And that really, you set the culture as a person, you set the behavior, you set pretty much everything. So what I do with many of my companies is, and my founders is to say, I want you to write the HR document of the company. Because that to me is the hardest thing, but that actually starts determining the culture. Do you really want people to come in at 9:30? I want you to write it down, because if you're not going to come at 9:30, don't write it down. Or if you leave it to somebody else, you've hired some HR manager from a services company, they'll simply come in with that services culture. And as India itself changes from a large services-oriented economy to a startup-oriented, product-oriented, or product offering-oriented economy, it's very difficult to find this shift, to find the HR person who actually gets it right. So the first person who gets it right is probably the founder, because in many cases the founder has created that company simply because he did not want to work in another place with a regimented HR policy. And it's, that's a founder who's come from somewhere else and has come here with a particular view of saying, I want to change the way things are done. So I'll talk about the 4 or 5 things that I believe HR traditionally has done and how I see that changing in this world of today, and I'm always, again, happy to take questions at any point in time. I broadly, at least in my, again, completely unstudied, whatever world, I've never studied HR apart from, forget it, anything else. I think there are 5 things that the HR function does, regardless of who does it. Maybe the CEO does it or somebody else does it. To me, one really important function which is largely overlooked, and the key function to me of HR is actually strategic. Where is this company going? What are the kind of people we want to have, we'd like to have? Where do we find these people? And what's the smartest way we can do to find these people, right? So we figured out, one thing we figured out around after doing 10 or 20 startups, that the one commonality to all the startups that I was funding is we required similarly, the similar kind of people, and the kind of people we required were actually, because you're so busy running a startup, many people who come from who are very good at a services business are people who say, well, give me detailed instructions, I will follow them to the T. And that's really what you've hired for in the past. But actually, in a startup, you don't have time to give somebody detailed instructions. So what you really want to do is find somebody, and we use this phrase often, who has a significant comfort with ambiguity. We call it CWA in all of these companies. What is this person's comfort with ambiguity? In the sense, if I give this person a vague direction, can that person get the job done? Even in the absence of all the information needed to take that decision, right? If I say, look, give me a proposal for this particular job and walk away, can this person figure out what a proposal looks like, how it should be presented, where the document should come from, what it should be printed on, or what kind of paper it should go on, or what kind of slide it should go on, what it should cost, and do everything himself or herself, and then come back to me with something I don't have to rewrite. And that to me is the most valuable skill, this entire idea of comfort with ambiguity. So we actually started in 2 or 3 of the companies putting a written test just to test comfort with ambiguity. Essentially, we'd give a set of unanswerable questions. So it was not like a SAT or GMAT or whatever, which requires IQs of 160 of linear thinking. This probably requires the equivalent in lateral thinking for you to be able to say, there is absolutely not enough information out here, but I still want an answer from you. Because it's not important what the right answer is. I want to figure out how you arrived at the answer. So essentially, this was a test, and in our companies, we've given it to everybody from the CEO to the person at reception, saying that's, of course, I want the receptionists to be able to have comfort with ambiguity. Somebody comes in and says something, the receptionist should be able to answer that question because the receptionist, he or she is your face to the outside world. So starting with, all right, one was comfort with ambiguity. 2, in one of my companies which does a lot of marketing work, we figured that we wanted people who had both left brain and right brain, who had both creative ability as well as some numeric ability. And we figured that the best of these people typically, actually, when we tracked back, said they went to a BMM, BMS kind of college, then they went and wrote CAT, and they got into some IIM or some MBA college. And what would happen typically is, if you hired them at the BMM, BMS stage, they would cost you 2 or 3 lakh rupees a year. And if you waited for them to go to an MBA college, they would cost you 6 to 10 lakh rupees a year. So essentially, because we wanted to cut our price, we said we will hire them directly out of BMM, BMS. How does it matter? What difference does the bloody MBA make anyway? Just get the same person anyway. Right? So we went straight to the BMM, BMS colleges, who were extremely happy to find somebody coming saying, we want to hire your people, because nobody ever goes to BMM, BMS to hire anybody. Right? And we would go to these kids and tell them, saying, why do you want to do an MBA? Right? And we would actually say, you come in here, you start at this 2, 3 lakh, whatever, and maybe in 3, 5 years, if you're good enough, you'll hit 10 lakhs. And to the brightest, it actually worked that way. So even strategically, we were able to significantly reduce our startup hiring costs by actually going to the source of the people. Right? And I've traditionally always believed, and I say this, and my HR people have shouted at me always, I said, so, the most dreamt about and most lusted for qualification is IIT plus IIM, right? In IIT, it's like probably computer science in Kanpur or in Madras, and then you go to your marketing at IIM Ahmedabad, then you go and join a bank. It's like I learned swimming for 4 years, and then I learn running for 2 years and become a pilot. There's absolutely no connection between what you learn at A and what you learn at B and where you end up. And the reason why that is in fact, we actually don't really have an education system, we have probably a filtration system. Right, 100,000 kids, of them maybe 1,000 get into IIT, of them maybe 200 get into IIM, and some lazy HR says, okay, it doesn't matter, I can't be bothered, hire them. If they want whatever salary they want, doesn't matter, hire them, right? So in the large companies with big staff and HR who doesn't probably have brains or probably wants to cover their ass and say, I'm hiring IIT, IIM people, that's fine. You can pay 25, 30 lakhs for a person. But why not pay 2, 3 lakhs for the same person and get them 5 years before? Right? And during that 5 years, they can add a lot more value to our organization. Maybe they can still end up at 10, 15, 20 lakhs later. Right? So once this entire idea of strategic HR, which is what kind of people do we want? Where are we going as a company? What is a trait we should be hiring for? As opposed to just going back and putting it down there saying, we want XYZ and I'm going to take XYZ from my previous organization. I think that's one really key thing that in fact many HR people that I've had the pleasure or dubious pleasure of working with, it's a hard one, a hard nut to crack. I remember one long, very funny conversation with one of the HR people in one of my companies where this lady came to me and said, Mahesh, I really want to talk with you. I said, yes. She said, I really want to have a differential salary policy for people with an MBA qualification. I said, I completely agree. She says, she thought she was going in for a fight. But I said, no, I agree completely. So she says, okay, Mahesh, what do you think? I said, I think they should start at 20% lower than non-MBAs, right? She said, no, you mean higher. I said, no, lower. And I told her, people who go to a typical MBA and come into a marketing organization, it takes 9 to 12 months to take the shit out of their heads, right? and another 3 months to fill the right stuff into their heads, right? They've learned some Kotler nonsense and some Archer and Trott and some nonsense, complete crap they've learned from the last century, right? So I said, if I have to pay 15 months of their salary, right, and I expect them to work for me for 5 years, that means 15 out of 60, but at least they should give me a 25% salary cut. But I'm okay, I'll be nice to you. We'll only start with a 20% salary cut. She quietly walked out and never saw the proposal again come from that company, right? So, I was also being a little facetious then. The poor girl was very confused with somebody said, you know, you're talking about the wrong things to the wrong person and so on and so forth. And one of the things I did put into policy in as many of my investee companies as possible, saying if I am a 12th class pass, so nobody should even demand that their employees be even graduates. Yeah, why should you? I mean, you might as well get this person. You know, I own the company, I run the company, how can I demand that you be a graduate here? I mean, come on. So I at least say, you know, you should be numerate, you should be able to hold a conversation in English. If you passed your 12th, that's good enough. That's pretty all right for me. Right? Beyond that, it's just a waste of time. Whatever you've done is all right. Right? So the first part here is, I think I'm pissing off a lot of HR people here. And the lady's laughing and saying, what am I doing? I'm in the wrong place. I came to the wrong. So the first part was really the strategic part. Who are we aiming for? What are we thinking? The second part of HR to me is the operational part, which actually not, again, too many people get into. The operational part to me is salaries, increments, you know, making sure that the payroll happens on time, the leave is accounted for, and so on and so forth. And I'll tell you an experience I had myself. So I actually ran a company myself some time ago, which was again into marketing services. And around, I'll give a prelude to this. And one of the things that I've seen common across many companies and startups is what I call this factor of 3. I'll spend a minute or two and come back to the other point. So when you start, there are 2 or 3 people, you plus 1 or 2 more people, and everybody does everything, and there's a huge amount of enthusiasm, and there's a particular culture in that company when you start. And the next thing happens when you become maybe a factor of 3, about 9 people. By that time, you kind of, each of you has got 1 or 2 more people who are assisting you. You kind of sort of begin to do, you do a little more of that, I do a little more of this, somebody does a little more of that. You know, so there's still like largely overlapping circles, but you're a little apart. The next change happens at the next factor of 3 when you're about 25, 30 people, which is by now you have to get HR, right? Because you've now got people, and somebody says, he's never coming in on time, she's never coming on time, and so on and so forth. That's when HR comes in, around the 25, 30% people mark. And often that's the death of a company, because you get bad HR, then the company just stays at that mark for a long time. So that's really a critical point when I really asked my CEO to say, you have to write the HR policy, not wait for the HR person to write the HR policy. So that's around the 25, 30% mark. The next big change comes at the next factor of 3, which is from 27 when you go to 81 or 80, 85 people, which is by then you've hired 4 people from the same cohort, and then you make one of them supervisor to the others. So you start having managers, assistant managers, senior managers, and so on and so forth. Now, there's a huge issue because in today's generation, this person doesn't want to manage his peers, right? They say, you know, they all joke together, laugh together, eat together, do whatever together, and this person has a huge issue in managing his or her 4 peers without being, you know, seen as being ostracized or thrown out from the group. So we actually had to put in training at that point to say, how is it that you can actually manage people who used to be your equal without feeling bad about it and without feeling embarrassed about it? And that's really one piece of training, middle manager training we've had to do at 2, 3 different middle management levels that a company comes to at around the 80% mark. The next big change comes when you're, again, a factor of 3, about 240 odd people, which is when you start doing scaling systems and you have, you know, a large HR team, department, and so on and so forth. I don't know, I mean, not too many people have written about it, but the key thing out here is at every point in time, the CEO has to reboot his mind. Because when you're running a 3-person company, it's very different. Next tipping point is 9, and next change point is 27, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I did want to make that point and come back and say, so in one of these companies where I was actually running it at about the 25, 30 people mark, what typically happens is by then at that time you're actually doing salaries by the seat of your pants. Say, yeah, what are you getting? I'll give you X more income, right? People come and join. But at around the 20, 25, 30% mark, no matter how confidential you keep salaries and whatever, everybody talks. And you'll come back and say, you are giving 5,000 rupees more to that person. That person getting 1,300 rupees more than me. I scored more in my final exam than that person, right? All this stuff happens at that point in time. And I just didn't know, and for me, I have this belief that, you know, HR should actually hassle me as little as possible. So how can I actually solve this problem where you have disparate salaries across a bunch, and how can I justify those disparate salaries, right? Because no matter what you do confidentially, everybody shares salary data. If not directly with you, they go on Vault or they go somewhere else, and the first thing is, yeah, I mean, how much should you get? What's your package? You know, and they'll sit back and say, and what's your take home? And that's the thing that people talk about. You know, our generation never talked about it, but this generation, first thing they say is, hi, I'm Mahesh, 6.4 lakhs, you know, CTC. so it's quite the opposite, right? So I really struggled to find an answer to this still in desperation, and I didn't have a HR person that I particularly liked or trusted. So I just sat back one weekend, and I actually sat on Excel, a tool I don't like very much, and I tried to say, you know what, how can I make this salary system completely transparent? So what we did was something pretty interesting. I kind of figured out that that particular company needed people across 9 grades from complete startup to CEO, right? So I defined the salary grades as in, you know, grade 1 starts at maybe 10,000 rupees a month to 18,000 rupees a month. Again, that data I did pretty interestingly to validate the data.